Warning. The following may contain concepts, ideas, and or reflections unique in nature and not yet approved by government and or corporate entities. This content is for entertainment purposes only and is not intended to stimulate further reflection or to perpetuate additional discourse beyond the scope already outlined by institutional curriculum.
So what's your plan here, Chief? Huh? Are you going to climb onto that pitiful little platform and scream until you're blue in the face? Maybe you should come right out and say it. The law no longer functions, and the courts are in the pocket of the new aristocrats. And you, the general public, have no more rights to access the law than you have a right to golf at a Palm Springs country club or to dine at a Michelin-starred restaurant. Do you think the people will be grateful to be told that democracy is effectively dead and the law is reserved for the rich? A little piece of advice. When reality is this bad, lying is a kindness.
In almost every nation, a judge's salary is paid with public funds, making them an employee of the state. And typically, this is the only requirement to earn a person the title of public servant. But apparently, the black robe chosen bristle at such a lowly inference, and it is no surprise. What other group in our modern society demand our sincere genuflection? You will only refer to them as your honor. You will stand when they enter. You will sit when they permit it. You may not interrupt or argue with the judge, and any failure to do so can result, at their discretion, in a contempt of court, and a fine and or jail time could result. Yet regardless of all the pomp and ceremony, they are the final gatekeepers of the law. Without them, the law is moot until it is ratified under their watchful eye. Of course, none of this unmitigated power has gone to the justices' heads. Rather, the public servants simply plow through their bureaucratic filings with the same amount of humble grace that could be expected of any glorified administrator. However, let's just speculate for a moment that perhaps a judge is a particularly important role, and that they are completely deserving of all the importance that they have bestowed upon themselves. I suppose then, in a democratic society, we would all be granted equal access to the judge's services, without exception. USA.gov states that the three branches of government are legislative, executive, and judicial. In nearly every republic or democracy, the executive branch is elected, and in the case of the US, so is the legislative branch. This is why the term lawmaker is synonymous with that of elected official. Also, around 25 of the 44 US presidents were lawyers before taking office. I think that it is safe to say that the law, both its creation and enforcement, is the primary function of our democratically elected government. If this is true, then it places an extreme weight of responsibility on the judicial branch to uphold the law, for an unenforced law is basically non-existent. Do we have equal access to the law? Are the wealthy and or their corporations receiving priority in the legal system? It seems to be a hollow promise if we can vote for the laws of the land, but if we lack the $250,000 retainer, we'll be denied access to them. One could say that there are public lawyers to represent the people who can't afford to pay for the services of one. However, in these cases, they are representing the state, not the individual. Public attorneys are in place to give the impression of unbiased representation. How elitist would it appear if a person who couldn't afford a defense lawyer to be legally eviscerated without even the pretense of equal treatment? Furthermore, how many times do public lawyers litigate on behalf of the penniless? In other words, the poor may be permitted to defend themselves in court, but God forbid they go on the offensive. Some magnanimous prosecutor may be willing to take a case on contingency, but this is entirely based on the discretion of the lawyer. However, begging for clemency is much more reminiscent to the level of groveling that aristocratic gentry would have expected from their lesser counterparts. Oh, but perhaps I've been too hasty to criticize. Maybe the possession of money is the best qualifier to allow access to the judiciary. Let us set aside violent crime for a moment. As previously mentioned, the state is naturally interested in stamping out this form of crime, since it represents aberrant behavior, which, if left unchecked, could lead to the disintegration of order, undesirable to the people seated at the very top of said order. So what do we have left? Mostly civil cases from contract disputes, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, divorce settlements, tax avoidance, etc., etc. Basically, the vast majority of legal disputes involve money. Maybe you're starting to see where I'm going with this. If disputes over money constitute the majority of cases and individuals with more money are given better legal service, then there must be some sort of deranged symbiosis at work here. Okay, a quick example. Hypothetically, there's a large-scale defrauder who has preyed upon the elderly and has successfully stripped many of them of their life savings. Now the broke victims are seeking justice, and with only their shriveled bodies to offer as payment, they're unlikely to procure any decent representation, if any at all. On the other hand, the con man has fistfuls of cash he has just wrung from those hapless souls, and he is more than willing to part with a portion of his newfound wealth in order to save his own neck. Ironically, most people who break the law do so to acquire more cash, a commodity that may in turn buy them immunity from prosecution. It is no wonder that fraudulent behavior is rampant in our society. If the upholding of the law is preferential to the rich, then we have by definition a plutocracy. Most of the plebeians have limited experience with the law, and as such there is an illusion of trust. That if an injustice was meted out against them, that the law would be there to represent them fairly. Analogous of the blindfolded Lady Justice, to illustrate that she is fair and unbiased, for she does not discriminate. She just weighs the facts. But the scales of justice that she holds are more commonly used to weigh gold, not facts. Coincidence? Perhaps Lady Justice doesn't make judgments based on sight, but I doubt that she cannot feel which side is more heavily laden with gold. This brings us to my solution, to completely socialize the judicial system. If there is a more deserving candidate to turn public, I can't think of it. Firstly, it is already primarily funded by the state. The police, judges, and public attorneys already receive their salaries from the government. Secondly, our elected constituents are lawmakers, so our fundamental democratic right should be fair, indiscriminate access to the law. Equal access to education, food, and medicine should all be secondary. The Constitution is a law, and it holds your rights. And if we are denied access to the law, then we are effectively denied our rights. And without rights, we can no longer be called free citizens. And our vote isn't worth the paper it is printed on. You could call it a small tweak with a major consequence. Eliminate private law firms and make the judicial branch fully public. And legal counsel is given on a first-come, first-served basis. Of course, the private law firms and the corporations will hate this, since it will result in a huge loss of revenue for both sides. And I have no doubt that loopholes will be sought from all the affected parties. Corporations will likely complain that they must have a full-time roster of lawyers to go through contracts and help them to navigate the labyrinth of corporate law. And to be fair, I'm sure it won't be convenient for them. But if convenience is the name of the game, maybe we should toss in a couple of judges to hand out verdicts in-house. And I'm sure we could throw in an advanced military as well to keep their competition in line. If a nuclear arsenal could also be of any help to our captains of industry, who are we to deny them? A quest for world domination can be a daunting task, and I think I speak for everyone involved when I say we want to help in any way we can. An exact figure is difficult to find, but urban.org estimate US state and local governments to spend more than $50 billion a year to fund their courts, and the federal courts take $8 billion to fund according to uscourts.gov. There are more than 100 million cases filed every year in the US, but I'd be damned if I could find any sort of breakdown of these cases and what percentage of the litigating parties are corporate or individual. I'd take a stab in the dark that with a total population of 331 million, that 1/3 of the total population is not litigating every year. This means that the corporate world is likely bogging down our legal system with their frivolous lawsuits and/or claims every year. And while $58 billion is not an eye-watering sum comparatively, it is a consternation to think of wealthy corporations flooding the publicly funded courts with their pablum while the electorate are waiting on hold, only to later be told that it may be more prudent to swallow their loss than to pursue justice in a drowning court. Still, it is not the first time the corporate model has found a way to profit from or directly receive public money, and it is not even the most egregious. If a fully public judicial system doesn't go far enough, then we could step it up even more. How about a completely autonomous court system with no lawyers, no judges? Just upload your evidence and testimony into a streamlined user interface, which may also aid both parties in understanding what is legally required of them at each step in the legal process. If the evidence and/or testimony is inconclusive and the AI can't reach a verdict, then a trial by jury is automatically initiated. Sure, there could be bugs, but it couldn't be any worse than what we currently have. I would prefer an AI render a legal judgment in my case than to have an AI cardiologist perform my heart surgery. On a side note, I do think it is odd that there are developments in robotics for warehousing and autonomous driving, two very blue-collar professions, where very complex systems are required to work in concert with one another to perform a basic task, whereas the entire legal system already functions quite closely to how computers operate. Binary, or the language of computers, is really just a series of yeses and nos. They can be built up into a complex architecture, but if you focus on any random line of code, there will always be a yes or no, true or false, question and answer. As such, computers aren't great at dynamic thought, but memory and fixed parameters are its foundations, and the law is quite similar. Tens of thousands of lines of law and legal precedent may be onerous for a human mind to instantly recall, but it should be easy to load a computer program with the same data. Then it is just a matter of a quid pro quo. Does the law apply? No. Move on. Does the next law apply? Yes. Has the litigant satisfied his burden of proof? Yes. How does the defendant respond? Etc., etc. The only possible reason why an autonomous court system was not pursued earlier is that private law firms are currently earning untold billions. The global top 100 law firms, largely based out of the US, collectively grossed $127.6 billion in 2021. So I guess there are at least 127 billion reasons for private lawyers to fight obsolescence. And since they're made up of a consortium of master word manipulators, applying their craft for self-preservation is to be expected. But whether they are rendered obsolete or turned into public servants, it would be certainly an improvement to the corporate servants they currently are. I believe that many are content with the current system because they have never had to rely upon it, and they believe that if they needed it, it would be there to work for them. How many have convinced themselves that they could let go of an injustice done to them, and that it was their choice? It must be a hard pill to swallow, living your life under the impression that you're an equal citizen until you receive your humbling from the court. The legal system seems to care less about the law and more about honoring their elitist hierarchy. Don't believe me? Try walking into a court armed with only the law and a mountain of evidence, but no lawyer to hold your hand. The court doesn't have a good sense of humor, so you won't be laughed out of the room. But you will be condescended to and fall victim to extreme prejudice. Your role is to fund the courts, not to utilize them. It reminds me of the often repeated line from the media. This or that system is just too complex for anyone other than an expert to comprehend. This is how you know a deception is occurring. If an idea can't be put into layman's terms, then there are really just two possibilities. First, that the expert truly doesn't understand the idea himself, which is why he would struggle to explain it in simple terms. Or that the expert is obfuscating the truth for some advantage.
Mr. Smith, I could explain to you how it came to be that your savings account was drained. But the advanced accounting jargon is so complex and detailed, it wouldn't serve to illuminate the situation any further. It would only cause your head to throb. Let me rather assure you that all appropriate actions were taken in compliance with generally accepted accounting practices, and every effort was made to retain your liquidity. But alas, it was all for naught, and your cup runneth over no more, save for a drop. But that should just about cover my accounting fees.
The price for freedom is eternal vigilance, is a quote often attributed to Thomas Jefferson. Clearly, this statement is true since due to ambivalence, every branch of government has the taint of external money, paving the way for policies that will profit a select few to the direct detriment of the majority. But in the discourse of corruption, we often forget about Quasimodo swinging in his judicial belfry, largely doing whatever he pleases, unfettered by the general population. And maybe our hunchback justice is wielding more power than we would like to admit. If we lack the vigilance to hold the courts accountable, then we will lose our legal representation, and with it, our constitutional rights, and ultimately, our freedom.